Welcome, lovely listeners, to the very first episode of Bend and Snatch, the inclusive fitness podcast looking at all things strength and flexibility, feminism, culture, health. I am your host, Pennie Vavridis, a queer strength and flexibility coach. I've got 10 years plus experience working in this industry, and this podcast is going to be the evolution of the Strong Habits podcast. That's something that I launched in lockdown in the midst of this global pandemic, right? And in the years since, obviously, hopefully, I've learned a ton. So I'm hoping that this podcast is going to bring something worth listening to for you, and with video, no less, which I hadn't actually thought about video properly before recording this interview. So this preamble, I'm recording days later to add my intro, and I'm wearing a different outfit. I'm in a different room. There's zero consistency here. So I am sorry, team. Anyway, let's get into it. So for the first episode of Bend and Snatch, I'd like to introduce you all to an incredible flexibility coach from South Africa, Nicks Wilson. Nicks is passionate about helping adults achieve feats that they'd never have known that they could achieve by making flexibility training accessible to everyone. Her mission is to empower as many people as possible with the tools to build high levels of flexibility and to be able to perform cool things like splits and back bends and handstands, regardless of age and background, and like starting ability. So, without any further ado, let's get into it. Welcome to the first episode. Thanks for being my first guest, Nicks. How you doing?
Yeah, thank you so much, Penny. So great to be here. I'm humbled to be your first guest.
I'm very excited. So I reckon that I met you, back in 2020? Met sort of virtually.
Yeah, I
We're
was
in
actually thinking about it today. I was going to say, do you know that we've known each other for 5 years now? Crazy.
That's ages, isn't it? That's cool.
I
So
know,
we were
right?
both doing Lucas's Range of Strength cert back on that
Yeah.
platform, Real Movement. Were you already coaching flexibility before then?
Yeah, so I had started getting into the more of the mobility side of things. So like what traditional people would understand as mobility, but it was more when I got on the platform that I started delving really deep into the flexibility side of things, which is what I always wanted to do in the end anyway.
Did you come from like a flexibility background? Were you a dancer or something?
Well, yes and no. So I did grow up doing dancing when I was a child. I mean, the pointed toes give give it all away. But I stopped dancing when I was about 12 and, went into other sports, but, ball sports and that sort of thing. And then in my 20s, I started teaching hip hop dancing. And so my love of the arts came back full force. And then I realized, okay, I haven't got much flexibility here. And while you don't need it for hip hop, it was just something that I wanted to rekindle. And I realized that adult Nicks is definitely leaves a lot to be desired on the table of the flexibility world. And so I was working really hard to try and improve my flexibility, but at that stage, this is now pre-COVID, so there really wasn't much online as to how to develop your flexibility. So I was kind of doing what I remember doing it as a child, and even though I didn't achieve much in my flexibility as a child, this was now even harder as an adult. That's where I started, and then I hurt my hips pretty badly doing repetitive training. I had imbalances. I wasn't strengthening. I was doing all the regular things that one does, and so I went down this rabbit hole of trying to improve the pain situation. I had a lot of sciatica and that kind of thing, and so initially that was where I was at. I was like, okay, let's just take flexibility completely off the table. Stop worrying about doing the splits and just try and do cool things without being in pain, like do regular stuff without being in pain, touch my toes. And so that's how I started this whole, going down the deep rabbit hole.
I wonder if flexibility training when you were a kid was similar to here. So like when I was younger, when we were doing stuff like flexibility, a lot of it involved like adults pushing us into positions, kind of standing on us,
Yeah,
leaning on us.
100%.
I'm pretty sure I ruined my hips through that process. Was it the same for you?
Yeah, very much so. We talk about the like PTSD some of our dance classes when we were growing up. A lot of it was get in that position, and if you can't get to the floor, we'll make you get to the floor. And you've got to hand it to like a lot of the gymnastics world, like it worked. I mean, the kids, but then there are those that just shouldn't have been in those situations, and we are the lucky ones that got back into it, where some people would have been traumatized for their whole lives and potentially injured as well. So it's definitely not a route that I would take now.
How does the way you train people differ if they've had a background in flexibility stuff versus if they're totally brand new to training flexibility as an adult?
Yeah, it is quite different. I mean, so for instance, the first thing, just off the top of my head, the first thing that I'm going to change is some of the hold times, because someone who's brand new to flexibility, if I tell them to be there for a minute, they potentially aren't even going to be able to do that. So we've got to teach them we've got to build the tolerance of being in a stretch as much as we've got to build the positions. So that's the one element. And then also just regressing the position like completely. A lot of what we see, like you and I have spoken about before, a lot of what we see on Instagram and even some of the things that I share of my training, like people will try and do something like that, and it's just so far removed from what they have access to. So we just break down the position, like at the core of what we're wanting to target, whether it's glutes, whether it's hips. We just find a position that's accessible to the person. And we can use things like, for instance, the incline bench has been such an amazing tool for developing quad and hip flexor flexibility, as well as being in like a pigeon, because you can use the incline to your advantage, and it presents itself with a really scalable position. So it's things like that we would approach with someone who's never done any flexibility, and then, as I said, just reduce the hold times. So they'll do a few sets of, say, like 30 seconds to start off with, building up to a minute, as opposed to someone who's got, like, if you come to me, I'm going to give you at least a minute in a stretch and explain to you the intensities that we're after.
I'm really glad that you brought up the pigeon example, because we've already spoken about it before, so I wanted to bring it up here as well. Because I find a lot of the time, especially if people go to yoga classes, pigeon's always treated like a thing that everyone should be able to do. And I find most people cannot get into that position, but they think it's a basic position, and then they end up just doing something else. How do you think that affects people when they spend maybe 1, 2, 3 years thinking that they're doing a pigeon, but nothing actually gets any better? And then what's the impact of that on someone?
Oh, wow, I love this question. Um, yeah, I feel like this is where the flexibility industry is letting a lot of people down, because it is, portraying these positions that are actually pretty advanced as you say, as something that everyone, like, why can't you do a floor pigeon? Whereas the floor pigeon is actually, I mean, I still feel it when I get into a floor pigeon in my first set. I feel a deep stretch. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've made it my business to, like, I love all the pigeon work. So just to provide context there, it's not a position that's going to be attainable for someone, well, with value. So we want to look at what's the goal at the end of the day. Are you wanting to do it just for the sake of doing it? Then maybe you'll get into the position for the sake of 3-second picture so you can have it on Instagram. But if you're wanting to get any value out of it, so many people that benefit so much more from, there are so many other variations of the pigeon work that we can do that just provides so much more for the body, for the glutes, and in carrying over into other positions.
What do you think are some other really common stretches that influencers will be giving people as beginner friendly options that are not beginner friendly at all?
There's quite a few hamstring ones. I've seen a lot of hamstring ones. One that I saw recently as well would be like the hero pose, which is when you're lying on your back with your knee bent. So like the quad. I mean, that's a massive, massive quad stretch. And as I say, like, even one of those, that's a position for someone to work at, to get to for about a year before they'll get to that. Whereas it's portrayed as like, okay, just go do your hero as a warm up now type of thing. That would be one. I think the pancake is also largely misunderstood. So a lot of people think that the pancake is an entry level position. And while it doesn't demand as much flexibility as some of the other positions, it demands a lot of strength. And so people can get super frustrated if we're talking about the impact, that you mentioned earlier, the impact that it has on someone. Like if they think, wow, I should be able to do this, then if they're training it for a certain period of time, they get frustrated, and that's going to impact the way they see flexibility as a whole. Whereas if we have a little bit more education, like, guys, the pancake is tough. The pancake, you should be working hard. It's going to take you a good bit of time to access a nice flat pancake, and you're going to build strength, you're going to build flexibility along the way. But don't be discouraged if you need to take a while to get there, because it is a tough position. So I think that that's where we, as educators in the industry, can do a better job of like just portraying these things as things that you need to work at, and not something that everyone should be able to do at any point in time.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to things like time frame, like realistic time frames for people, what do you say to someone when they're like, how long will it take me to do a pancake, or how long will it take me to
Oh,
get
I
a
hate
front
I
split?
hate it when people ask me. I hate it when people ask me how long it's going to take them, and I hate it when people ask me how long it took me, because some of the things that I got were much quicker than it's going to take most people. Um, but what I tend to say to people is, give yourself a year and you can do a lot. A lot can change in a year. And if you're not willing to put aside a year, then we've got to talk about priorities and that type of thing. Because a year's not, in the grand scheme, isn't actually a long period of time. But to make worthy change, give yourself at least 6 months, give yourself a year, and you could do a lot. I can't guarantee what you will see from that, but I know that you will be really surprised by what you'll be able to achieve.
How often do you think people need to be training flexibility specifically over that year to make meaningful progress?
It depends on their goals. So if they have a few flexibility goals, that's going to require a little bit more frequency across the week. But for instance, like if you just want your front splits or you just want your side splits, once a week is plenty. You don't need to be doing it a lot. And I actually don't encourage people to do it a lot, because if you, as an adult, we've got to have the intensity. So intensity drives adaptation, just like in strength training. And so if we are hitting a really nice level of intensity in our session, then we need that recovery time. And people often like they underestimate the value of having that recovery time. So you do your front splits once a week, you hit it nice and solid so that you can drive some adaptations, get into new territories, then give yourself the rest of the week to recover, and you'll see some really nice gains. Once a week is plenty.
I think people really underestimate the DOMs you can get from flexibility training. Like you do
100%.
flexibility classes a week, and it's like a whole. There are several days where you're in much more pain than you would be if you were just squatting, and no one thinks that that's what's going to happen.
No, it's like it's also a piece that, like, when my clients first come to me and I'm like, okay, this is a slightly different way, especially in person, because I'm there making sure that they're working working really hard. And I'll say to them, look, if you feel these tomorrow, don't be scared. If you feel like you're actually more stiff tomorrow, don't be scared. It means you worked hard today, and that's a good thing. And your baseline levels will improve over time. But DOMs are a good thing. It means that, we don't want to be sore all the time. We've got to look at that, just like strength training. But it is people often, it's so often the second day when people have just done one session with us, they're like, wow, I couldn't believe how sore I was the next day. So it really is hugely underestimated.
How do you think it differs the way that you would train someone for flexibility if they're like an athlete or have, I don't know, maybe they do yoga or dance or something, versus someone who's just a normal person who wants to touch their toes or something?
So the approach is slightly different in a couple of ways. Firstly, exposure to flexibility, as we've spoken about, so that's going to impact how we'll approach it. But also keeping in mind the other activities, you got to sort of manage their how much they can do as well. So it really just depends. It's the same, just the same as if someone has a strength goal but they've got all this other stuff going on. You're going to take all the factors into account. What are they doing? How is it going to affect their recovery? So you kind of would approach it in the same way that you would if someone's coming to you for strength training. You just manage all the different factors. And then if someone isn't doing much and they're coming to you for flexibility, the same type of thing. Okay, they're a newbie, so I've got to take that into consideration, but they could also potentially do a few more things. So like if people are doing only flexibility training with me and they're doing nothing else, then they will most likely do front splits, back bends, pancake work, and side splits. So then they can do a lot more through the week mostly. And yeah, so it kind of just depends.
How do you, other than like building up time slowly, how do you train someone to like be still in those stretches and not fidget and not like come out of the hard place?
Yeah.
How do you convince someone to do that?
Well, there's a couple of techniques. Like the block crush method has become like my absolute favorite, because that's where we work with the shortening side of the joint. So for instance, if you imagine a forward fold, a hamstring stretch, okay? So you got the person down and you get them to put a block between their belly and their thighs. And then through the duration, in intervals of say 5 to 10 seconds, they've got to stand there and they've got to squeeze the block. So automatically I'm giving them firstly something for their mind to focus on other than being in an uncomfortable stretch, as well as I've given them a very specific task that's going to help them to engage the muscles relating to the shortening side of the joint, which are ultimately going to help them with the lengthening side. So I really, really love very focused target-based training, task-based training, all of those types of things I absolutely love. And it's probably because I do really well with them. If I've got something very specific I need to do, it's way better than like just telling me, okay, do this for 2 minutes. You know, my mind starts going all over the place, and like I'm also a first class fidgeter. So this type of application worked really well with me, and I see it tends to work for other people as well.
Yeah, I really love those things as well. I think having something really specific to focus on for 10 to 30 seconds is quite useful for bringing people into their bodies more. What's a way that someone can use that within kind of a 2-minute hold of something so that they're getting both things, but it's keeping them focused and still?
Well, it would be the same thing. So you'd work with intervals. So you have the periods where you squeeze in the block, then the periods where you're relaxing, and you also just guide them through. Okay, now count your breaths instead of watching the clock. Do 5 really nice slow breaths. So we're also educating them on how breathing has an impact in a nice long hold that you're doing, because it also calms the nervous system down. At the end of the day, throughout our flexibility training, we're having this constant conversation with our nervous system, whether we like it or not. And using our breathing is one of the main ways we can get the body to calm down. So we have these techniques. Also PNF, the active stretching, where we're contracting one muscle and relaxing another. That also helps to create that mind-muscle connection of this muscle is going to contract now and then it's going to relax. And so that also just helps the process. So we have those kind of techniques. And you once more, as you go along with the person, you'll find the things that land with them. So we kind of, you strategically introduce them to this concept and that, and then somewhere along the line, you'll find, okay, this is what works for them. And then you sort of drive that a little more, if you know what I mean.
I think that's really helpful. For the people listening who maybe haven't heard of PNF and like contracting, relaxing, would you be able to give them an example of what that might look like within a stretch?
Yes, absolutely. So a very easy one is if we think about a quad stretch. This may be where we have, like, if we think about a couch stretch. So couch stretch is where we're stretching either the quads or the hip flexors, or potentially both. But our shin is going to be up against the wall. And you can imagine, so the knee is flexed, the back knees on the ground, and the knees flexed, and you're going to have a nice stretch in the quad. Okay, so PNF is going to contract the muscles on both sides of the joint in order to facilitate a few things. So firstly, it once again brings about that mind-muscle connection where, okay, I'm contracting the muscle, then I'm relaxing it. And it also strengthens the position. Okay, so what we would do is, one contraction that we could do there would be to press the foot into the wall. So we're going to engage our glutes really hard and press the foot against the wall, driving the glutes forward. Again, introduces a deeper stretch in the quads and the hip flexor. And then we'll relax that for a few seconds. And then we will do the opposing side. So then we will either drive the knee forward. Now it's an isometric contraction, so you're not going to move anywhere, but you're just contracting the muscle really, really hard and then relaxing into the stretch. And it tends to be super effective at getting more out of the stretch. You're able to access more range, and once more, just creates really nice awareness in the body.
And what scenario would someone use that versus doing something more like a dynamic stretch?
So a dynamic stretch, it depends. I mean, you can really use both. I tend to find that a dynamic stretch is a little more. I use them more in a warm up sense. So, you're getting some movement in. But when we're looking to deepen the stretch, I tend to use slightly more passive ones because you can feel what's going on really, not passive, static, still. You can feel what's going on really nicely, and you're able to really see, okay, I'm at this position now, but by the end of the set, I'm a little bit deeper. Whereas something that's a little more dynamic, it's slightly harder for us to tell if we are even going deeper in the stretch or out. And as you're moving through, you may get more, but it's also going to be slightly more temporary, where these tend to be the ways to increase your range of motion that last a little bit longer.
So for people listening, if they want to structure a flexibility session for themselves, what kind of order of things would you recommend? I guess starting with those dynamic stretches and then moving through.
Yeah, I always start with dynamic work because it just gets it just gets the blood flowing literally, and especially if you're in a cold climate, and you need to physically warm up. I mean, cold is one of the things that do affect the flexibility, your flexibility. So warming up physically is really nice, and it's just a nice thing to do. So I will do some kicks or some leg lifts, that kind of thing. Nothing too intense. We're not out for anything other than just warming up the body. And something like elephant walks, which are for the hamstrings, they work really nicely as well. So you're easing in and out of the range that you have access to for the hamstrings. So that would be something that I would do in the beginning. And then it's always helpful to do some hip rotation work in the beginning of the session, because mostly our hip rotation, external rotation, is going to affect both the work that you're doing in the sagittal plane as well as the frontal plane. And then just strengthening internal rotation is often useful. So many people, I mean, I know you remember that wonderful internal rotation drill that we did. It's just, those are things that an assessment will say if you actually need it or not, but they're super handy to have. So those are generally in the beginning of my flexibility sessions. And then we would have a piece that would be we can term the strength component. And that's where you'll be wanting to, let's say you're working on the front splits. We want to be working on the quad and hip flexors strengthening, the glute strengthening. That type of thing is going to come in there. And we can also do some longer holds in something like a long lunge in the front splits is a beautiful place to put that, because you're strengthening as well as stretching out the hip flexors. And then you'll go into your longer stretches towards the end of the session, where you're not looking to generate a lot of power. You're looking to be in the position and potentially enter into some new territories in your range. That would be where you do your actual front splits hold, or for someone that's just starting out, that would be our pike hold or standing pancake hold, depending on what we're doing. But that's where you're going to be doing your longer stretches.
I think that's probably the best order of things. That's generally what I do with people as well, and it kind of mimics what you would do in a strength session, where you start by just doing the easy shapes, warming up, working towards doing the harder stuff. What do you think people can do to avoid either overstretching or instability issues from doing too much, I guess?
Doing too much is a tricky one because it's going to depend on many things. Firstly, what they're doing in their session, but also what they're doing outside of their session. And remember that other life factors also can contribute. We're not all, life isn't this beautiful little box where everything is just nicely there. So let's say if this person has a family that's maybe a stressful situation, job stress, that kind of thing's all going to contribute. So we've got to take those factors into account. But as far as not injuring themselves is concerned, we all generally have this place where we can feel like, if I push this, I might not be in a safe position. And so generally listening to the body in that respect is quite important, so that we have this balance. And especially in flexibility training, because we're now trying to also get our body to adapt, we want the nervous system to relax a little bit. So that's where relying on the contractions and moving into and really working on the strength component of whichever position that is going to be your best friend. So if you're in a position and you feel like you're on the edge of a cliff, dial back just a little bit, like 3% back, and rely on and feel that fortifyingness of the strength components that you would have been exposed to. That's generally going to keep you in a safe position, because we all kind of know, okay, I might push this. And then, I mean, it's just like strength training. You can do something on a squat and then, the next thing, blow your back out. And it's not the squats issue, it's just whatever, so that can happen. But for the most part, if you're playing the long game and you don't rush your stretches, don't rush into the deepest part of your range right at the get-go, you mostly will be okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it's really sensible. I think with flexibility training, especially in a class environment where people around you might be really flexible, there's that tendency to be like, oh, I just want to rush, right? Want to get there faster, and you can force yourself into positions just because, I don't know, maybe you're embarrassed, or maybe you're just like overexcited or something.
Yeah.
And you have to remember that you're still like challenging your muscles the same as you would be if you were doing like your 1 rep max.
100%.
You don't want to be maxing out every time you squat, because it becomes detrimental. You don't keep squatting more, you end up squatting less, or you end up hurting yourself.
Yeah.
And it's the same, I think, for flexibility. But I don't know if people think about flexibility in the same way that they think about their strength training, and that's probably why people either get hurt or don't make progress.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And once more, I think it comes down to education, and we're doing our best to change these things. And having guidance, I think, in flexibility training is very important. And a class can only get you so much, because you now have whole bunch of people there who are going to make you excited. Our egos love to get involved. And like so and so over there is able to touch the ground, and you're like, oh, I'm sure I can do that. But one of the things, so quite a nice thing that you can always rely on is your breathing. If you cannot breathe in a stretch, you're too deep, whether you feel like you're able to be there or not. So that is like one of those fundamentals that people can rely on. It's like 2 reps in reserve, like it's a decent way of like seeing like, oh, if my heart's racing and I can't breathe in the position, I should back off just a little bit.
I think that's a nice easy way for people to be able to like self monitor what they're
It's super
doing and like
practical.
adjust it. What do you think for you personally, and or I guess for the people you work with, what do you think the hardest bit about flexibility training is?
Consistency. Not for me, for the people that I work with. I don't struggle with being consistent with this stuff because I love it. But I think what catches people is, once more, they have this glorious idea of doing the splits in 3 weeks. And then they come to me and I'm giving them these freaking leg lifts that are torturous, and I'm not letting them get anywhere near the splits, and it's just really hard, sweaty, grindy work. And they're like, this sucks. you know? And so that's when, like, after a little while, the excitement starts to dwindle. And like anything worth having, they've got to rely on grit. And I think that that's where most people struggle, is because they underestimate how hard a lot of these positions are, like in terms of the strength demands. And I put a lot of focus on the strength components of flexibility training because of how much it impacted me, and because I was on the opposite side where I got injured as a result of those imbalances not being there. So I tend to be more conservative with, like, you're gonna take a while before you're gonna get the splits, but you're gonna be really strong when you do it, And so that is what makes people struggle. For me, I guess, like, yeah, I don't really know what the hard part is for me, to be honest. Talk to me
No
about
hard
the
part
press
for
to
you.
hand. No, talk to me about the press to handstand, and we got a very different conversation. But but I love all
Well,
things flexibility.
how's your press to handstand going? You've been practicing loads.
Oh God, have I? Yeah, no, I'm starting to like I'm only now starting to see like that this might be possible in this lifetime. That I'm at now. But it's a lot of grinding, and it's taken more grit than anything else in my life. The tuck handstand, and now working onto the press as well. So it's taken more discipline and grit than I've in anything that I've taken on.
I think trying to find that discipline and grit is probably the hardest. The hardest thing for
It is.
learning any new thing, because it's meant to be a hobby, so it's meant to be fun, and trying to like
Yeah,
keep the fun but also keep doing the hard thing.
100%.
It's hard.
Yeah, I think I don't know when it happened, but I think somewhere in the world we suddenly created this idea that you can have anything that you want to and you can have it today. And I think our world of convenience, if you think about everything, Amazon, I mean, in the US, I couldn't believe it. I was there, I ordered something in the afternoon, it was there before I even had dinner. We have
Wow.
everything. Yeah. We have everything at our disposal, at our fingertips, whenever we want it. And so we just have this idea that physical feats are the same, and it's really not. But I also think that it's like if you look at the athletes, I don't think enough has been portrayed about the hard work that they put in, you know. And so I think that that's also skewed our perception of anything that we take on, and that if we don't get it within a short period of time and we don't get it easily, it's not worth doing, or we'll never get it. I think that that's where like things have gone wrong in the world. I could talk on this for ages, but like I said in my newsletter this week as well, consistency is such a big thing, but understanding that you won't enjoy every session. You're not going to enjoy every session, and you're not going to enjoy every drill that's given to you. Once you accept that and embrace the suffer on that, I'm not a no pain, no gain type of person, but there is an embracing of the suffer that we have to do. And once you do that, I think it changes your whole journey, because then it's not as much of like fight everything. Then you can like get on there and feel empowered and feel really like satisfied when you even just do the whole session.
Yeah, I think there's something quite powerful in that. And also, I guess maybe learning to enjoy the feeling even if it's horrible, or at least learning to enjoy
Yeah.
the feeling after it's done, that you've
Yeah.
done it. Finding some part of it that you get to enjoy. I think for me, being able to do more of something or better of something than I could do before is often the thing that helps me,
Yeah.
even when I hate it, even when it's horrible. Because it's like, okay, it's horrible and it still sucks as much as it's always sucked, but it's better. It's better than it
Yes.
was, even though it sucks the
Your
same amount.
execution.
And
Yeah.
that feels helpful, you know?
100%. No, I completely agree. It's also one of the things that I'm very big on is trying to ensure that my clients see as quickly and as early as possible the progress that they're making, because flexibility is also pretty obscure in that respect, unfortunately. I mean, weight on the bar, 5 kgs, 10 kgs, we see it. We get the dopamine hit. We get it right then. And flexibility is a little more abstract in that respect. So sometimes you're like, am I even getting better at this? So I'm very big on like in all of the things, like I'll get my clients to set up in the most random of ways so that they can see, okay, last week I was there, this week I'm here, next week, and so they can very clearly see those markers for success, because it's a natural motivator. It keeps us going. As you say, even if it's horrible, at least if we can see the benefits of what we've done and how we've done it, it really motivates you to keep going.
What are some ways that you're tracking those markers of progress for people?
So I use things like yoga blocks really frequently, just in terms of heights. Like for instance, all of the hip flexor work that we do, whether you're doing it in standing or a seated way, you can find a way to measure your height and be very specific with it. So I'll have targets that they have. Either if they're at home, I will like see something in the background. Okay, next time lift your leg as high as that couch. And then and same on the floor. Like you got the yoga blocks, you could put them next to you if you're lifting your leg. And also using blocks in positions like the front splits as well, whether they're using them to support themselves on, which is super valuable because that in itself creates it, or just have them next to you, that each time you can see where you're at in relation to where you were before.
Yeah, I like that. Having things that you can see in the moment as well,
Yeah.
and not just
Yeah.
like taking pictures so you don't see until afterwards.
Yeah.
That's a really nice idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's even nice in your, as you say, while you're busy doing it, you're like, damn, I'm doing this, and it motivates you to even work harder in that specific set. And so I love using those techniques.
Yeah, that's awesome. Related to something you said earlier, one of my clients last week was telling me that they keep getting ads for 30-day front split programs.
Oh.
And they were like, shouldn't we be doing front splits every day? Because we're working towards it, but we're starting from the beginning, you know? And I was like, that's probably not going to be helpful. And it's a bit frustrating, I guess, that the world of the internet is telling people over and over again that you can do these things in 30 days when nobody can do it in 30 days.
No, I think I put something out the other day. I'm like, this is not correct. Anyone who gets their splits in 30 days, please tell me so that I can see this amazing work. Because unless you were there in 30 days before, like the chances of you getting it within 30 days are really slim. As an adult who hasn't had experience before, maybe as a gymnast, there are outliers. There's always outliers. But for the average person, those ads drive me insane because once more, I don't know their methods. I haven't gone into them at all. So maybe they're doing fantastic work, and but just that once more, that idea of like now someone goes through a program and they don't get their splits in 30 days and they're still like this high off the ground and they're like, what's wrong with me? I'm such a loser. I haven't done anything right, or stretching doesn't work. And both of those are like terrible places to be, because stretching 100% does work. It just takes time. And also, there's nothing wrong with you. Most people need a lot more time than 30 days to get into their splits.
Yeah, absolutely. How much do you think like hard work and consistent training can like overrule just being genetically bendy from the beginning? Like, can someone who doesn't have that genetic advantage still learn something like the splits?
Oh, 100%. I mean, once more, I can't say that every single person can do the splits, because there are a few people who just hip structure this type of thing, maybe won't be able to get 180 degrees. But every single person can achieve really nice flexibility levels if they just prepare to work at it and be consistent. That is a hill I will die on.
Excellent. I think that's important for people to hear, because especially because a lot of people will look at us ignoring the fact that we've been training for years and years and years and years and be like, oh well, you're just genetically bendy, of
Yeah.
course you can do that.
Yeah.
And then think that that means that they can't.
Yeah.
And that's a shame.
Yeah, it's a huge shame. And it's one more like thing that I want to shout from the rooftops, is that you can achieve so many amazing things with direct work. And I think that that's also part of the problem, is like it seems like an overwhelming task. Where do I even start? I can't do floor pigeon. I can't do hero pigeon. I mean, hero pose on the floor. Where do I start? So that's where it gets overwhelming for people. But just to know, like, if you start at grade 1, you can get like really, really high level with a lot of work and consistency. And it's just so rewarding. It's you learn so much about yourself. I'm sure you found the same thing. Like even learning to be still and learning not to fidget. Like there were so many mental breakthroughs that I had along the way in my flexibility journey, and I think it's a very rewarding one for people to go on, whether they achieve, the splits or not, to be honest.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think as a hypermobile person, learning how to train flexibility properly has been invaluable because for so long I was just kind of yanking on my joints with no real comprehension of what I was trying
Yeah,
to do. And I think a lot of people do that. And
yeah,
a lot of hypermobile people will be afraid of flexibility
yeah,
because
yeah.
they've been told to avoid it. And I think that
Everything.
makes you more vulnerable rather than less.
Yeah, completely. I have I often have someone hypermobile in my DMs. Like, is it safe for me to even think about going on this journey? And once more, it's just about education at the end of the day.
What advice would you give to hypermobile people wanting to be more flexible but not knowing what to do about it?
For a hypermobile person, for their confidence, it's going to be the best route is going to be to hire a coach on a one-on-one level, because as you know, each body is very specific. So it's something generic is going to be more challenging to follow, because you're not quite sure if all of it is right for me, or if I have to hold back, which do I have to hold back on, and this type of thing. But I think that your body as well. And once more, going into that, idea of like relying on where you feel strong, and also the breathing once more is like such an important place, because even if you can tolerate it, if your body is giving off signals of fear, that's going to be an area that you want to pull back on, and rather work slowly towards it and build strength in the area just below it, for lack of better words, and then make that area really strong, and slowly increase the tolerance.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. What do you think, if you have some, is your best advice for people in general who are looking to start a flexibility journey?
Less is more. Less is more. You don't need 7,000 drills. You need a few that you stick to and get really, really good at. That would be my like absolute top piece of advice. Get on it, like, because what I see most people do with their flexibility training. Okay, I want to stretch. Okay, so then at the end of their session, which is firstly you tanked, all your mental energy is already gone. So firstly, that's not where I recommend that you put your flexibility. But anyway, that's another topic. So they'll go there, and then they will do this stretch that they've seen on Instagram. And then next session, they will do another stretch that they did see on Instagram. And so they're getting a stimulus and they're feeling good. Like, wow, this feels really great. But they're not going to see where the progress is coming from, because how do you progress? You repeat something at nauseum. So that would be that's my gold standard piece of advice. Choose 5 stretches, no more. 5 stretches, no more, and do those until you are really, really good at them. And then take those same stretches and progress them. If you don't know how to do that, you can reach out to me or look on my page. I've got many. And work progressively like that with strategy, as opposed to this, like using the flexibility as just a thing that's there. Put strategy to it and understand that repetition is where the magic comes in. That
Yeah, I
was
love
a
that so
mouthful,
much.
sorry.
I think that is excellent advice because I think that is part of why people end up thinking flexibility doesn't work or stretching doesn't work because
Yeah,
they'll do one
100%.
stretch once and then nothing changes, and that's
Yeah.
not helpful.
No, no. I mean, we all like it takes a good few weeks for you to even understand exactly what's going on in the stretch. That's why like my phases for my clients are at least 6 weeks long. It takes them like 3 weeks just to understand the position. And then we've got another 3 weeks to dial in. And then the phase after that's not going to change everything. I'm just going to help them to progress that. So, that's a lot of what I do with my clients is basically keep them on this straight and narrow path, and not like the squirrel brains where we're doing this and doing that and doing this and doing that, and not really seeing the value of the repetition in our progress.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think a lot of people struggle to understand why you would be doing the same thing over and over and over again for weeks. but it's so important because that's the only way you kind of learn how to do something. And if you're changing everything all of the time, then it's really difficult to learn anything. And if you're not learning, then you're probably not getting any better.
Yeah, 100%. I do think that that is something that people hugely underestimate because I don't think it's anything other than they've never really thought about it. How will I get better at the thing? And so that's where it is once more our job to educate and help people to see, okay, we're just going to do the same thing, and when you're bored of doing it, we're going to do it some more. And this is how you will eventually thank me.
Just have to keep doing the same thing over and over and over again
Yeah. I mean, I
until
remember when I first started, like Penny, I think I did probably the same program for like a year, like, and I'd message Lucas. I'd be like, "How am I doing?" And I'm squirrel brain number one. So, and he'd be like, "Yeah, that was good. Keep going." Like I'm like, okay, keep going, keep going, keep going. And so I think that was one of the biggest things that I learned is like just the value of sticking to something, and like your post said recently, like, wow, this stuff works. You practice something and it gets better.
gotta keep doing it over and over again.
You've
It's
got to
hard because
keep
that's
doing
not the
it.
thing we want to hear. We don't want to be told to
No,
just
no, no,
do it.
no. We don't want to hear that at all. We all want the magic pill. We all want the hack. I mean, the world is full of hacks. We all want the hack. And I'm not the one that sells hacks at all. If you come to me, I'm telling you straight, you commit to a year.
Yeah, it's a slow process. We'd probably make a lot more money if we sold hacks, but I
I
think I'd feel
know.
really
I've
guilty
been
about it.
told, these marketing gurus that come into your DMs, I'm constantly being told like you're not selling people what they want. I'm like, yeah, but I'm going to sell people the rewards if they do sign up.
A, a
I'm here
long,
for
slow
I'm here
game.
for transformation, not for like quick buck. There's nothing satisfying about that.
No, I totally agree. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been really interesting. Is there anything you would like to add on the topic of flexibility training for the masses before you go?
No, you guys can just remember me for the saying of once is never.
Once is never. I love that. Well, thank you very much, and I hope everyone
Thank
enjoyed
you so
listening to
much,
this.
Penny. Yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for having me. It's been great.